Mr. Chairman, we're ready when you are.
Thank you, Teresa. We'd like to welcome everyone to the Wednesday, August 26th Planning Commission meeting for the town of Hilton Head Island. This will be a workshop with members of the town council. We want to welcome any members of the public who are joining us. Mr. Carstairs, who is the chairman of the development team, is also joining us. Any members of the individual task forces that were on the visioning process, we want to welcome you as well. And Teresa, are we in compliance with FOIA?
Yes, sir, we are.
Thank you, Teresa. And Teresa, would you call the roll for the members of the Planning Commission that are present?
Yes, sir. Mr. Perry?
Here.
Mr. Stevens?
Here.
Ms. McGowan?
Unmute yourself, Leslie. Leslie, you're still muted.
Here.
There. Thank you. Mr. O'Neill?
Here.
Mr. Scanlon?
Here.
Mr. Alfred?
Here.
Mr. Theodore?
Here.
Mr. Christian?
Here. And Krista, could you call the roll for the members of the town council that are present?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Mayor McCann.
Here.
Mr. Grant.
Here.
Mr. Ames.
Here.
Mrs. Becker.
Here.
Mr. Lennox.
Here.
Mr. Stanford.
Here.
And we just received word Mr. Harkins will not be here today.
Well, once again, we want to welcome everyone. We have a pretty tight agenda, and we realized that the members of the town council need to depart at 11 o'clock because they have another obligation for another meeting. So we are going to try to move this along. And as such, we have the town council members set to comment first because we don't want to be up against that deadline and not give them the opportunity to be heard. Any members of the public, we welcome your participation. I know there were various comments, and we do have one individual who has signed up to speak later on in the program. And with that, Taylor, would you walk us through the process? And I want to say before Taylor starts that this has been a over 2-year journey with hundreds of town citizens participating in the process, and then individual task forces set up with multiple opportunities for citizen input. This has really been a bottom-up process, and that we're all very, very proud of. And I know Mr. Scanlon, who's the chairman of the Comprehensive Planning Committee, his committee met yesterday, and I believe they have unanimously recommended this plan to the full Planning Commission. So this has been vetted through many processes. We are getting very close to the end of that journey, and we look forward to Taylor's presentation and input from both the commissioners and the members of the town council. And with that, Taylor, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Town Council, Planning Commission staff, and Island community tuning in. For the sake of time this morning, I will not be presenting the plan section by section. Many of you were able to participate or watch the 2 information sessions I conducted for our plan with the Planning Commission, where the specifics of the plan were discussed. So this morning, I will be keeping my remarks on the shorter side to allow for as much time as possible to hear from you all. For the next few minutes, I will discuss some of the higher level facets of our plan about the process and compliance, structure and layout, community alignment, and managing the process. So as an incorporated municipality in the state of South Carolina, we are legally required to have a comprehensive plan and to update it on a 10-year cycle. Staff feels our plan is compliant with the state requirements for content and upon adoption this fall with the requirements for timing. The State Enabling Act for Comprehensive Plans does specify the inclusion of 9 elements to be addressed in terms of baseline community data and information, and in the presentation of goals and implementation strategies. Typically and intuitively, the comprehensive plan structure for the town has been around the elements. In our plan, the elements are defined in Section 2 and then keyed throughout the document such that there is clear connection between the core values and the elements. Every element is addressed by at least one goal or strategy from each core value. In the plan, the bulk of what we have defined as goals, strategies, and tactics are focused around the core values. We took a bold new approach to do it this way as a means to build off the momentum of community engagement from the Our Future Visioning initiative. Our Future produced the core values and what we have used as the foundational vision for our plan. State law requires the plan to have a vision, so the timing worked out perfectly for initiating the town's 10-year rewrite of the comprehensive plan. Many of you know that community engagement for the Our Future initiative was extensive. So the conversations about our plan carried this forward, beginning with roundtable discussions and interactive thinking with the Our Plan work groups. The groups were each focused on a core value as well as parks and recreation. Through these meetings, the participants worked with staff to develop the goals, strategies, and tactics for our plan based on key ideas and opportunities identified through the process. The key ideas and opportunities are bulleted in the text to demonstrate the genesis of the goals, strategies, and tactics, so they will sound similar. The big takeaway from the process for our plan is that this was not developed in a vacuum. It is very much a community plan born from the very community-driven visioning process. It remained clear during the Our Plan process that the community is passionate about Hilton Head Island. For every goal, strategy, and tactic in this document, you can find a person or institution in this community who feels strongly about it, for every single one. Our participants in this process consistently came back to the tenets of excellence, collaboration, and diversity in economy, spaces, and people. Without a doubt, this plan focuses on revitalization and modernization of the town's economy and infrastructure while building an inclusive and diverse community. For this reason, from the outset, for the plan's structure and layout, staff has sought to ensure the presentation of the plan is user-friendly while meeting the needs of the town as an official document. We wanted it to be interesting and tangible, and also meaningful to those of us who will use the plan and to the public and island community. The document is ambitious, it's unique and innovative. It will push us all beyond stagnancy, but it is also very reasonable and within the town's scope of work and purview. It presents a stronger balance between residents and visitors, aligns with the community interests, and has flexibility that can allow for adjustments to be made as time and conditions dictate. Staff firmly believes what is in this document is what we need to move forward for the next 20 years. The intent is for our plan to exceed the expectations of the island community and to have an impact on everything elected and appointed officials and staff are doing for the town and island. Now I want to speak a moment about community alignment, because this has been exciting to see and it instills confidence that there is consistency in what the community says for public and private initiatives. Page 97 of our plan in the Excellence chapter speaks to the 3 strategic outcomes and key ideas that came out of Town Council's retreat last December. These all correlate with the core values that came out of our future and 10 key community themes that are listed in the executive summary that have come out of our plan. This speaks strongly to how tied in our elected and appointed officials are with staff and with our community. Staff looks forward to seeing how you all take our plan forward into prioritizing the next year of planning. In terms of the private sector, the Chamber last week presented the preliminary vision, strategic goals, and strategies for the destination marketing plan they have been working on this year. The Chamber's vision complements the Our Future vision that was carried into our plan. There is definitely holistic alignment. The Chamber document serves a different purpose for the community by providing tourism-based direction, but a lot of the inputs and outcomes are all similar and reflective of an aligned mindset within the community. The destination marketing plan commissioned by the Chamber takes similar aspects of our plan another step forward in specificity and into action. It was very timely, actually, that these 2 projects were in development together, as I was able to interview with their consultant team and provide drafted versions of our plan and the Parks and Rec Master Plan to keep them in the loop with our own community efforts. In this way, we're already initiating Strategy 4.1 in the Economy chapter to work with the Chamber to explore, understand, prepare for, and adapt to the future of tourism. Questions have come up along the way about managing the process for what comes after adoption. So I want to touch on this before I wrap up. Managing the process entails prioritization, measuring performance, accountability, and communication with the public. These are specific to next steps and processes that are directed by our plan. There are actually several goals, strategies, and tactics in our plan that address and provide some indication for ways to manage the process. Prioritization begins with Town Council and is embedded in many stages of our project and initiative implementation processes. For measuring performance, Excellence Strategy 3.1 speaks to evaluating the comprehensive plan for consistency and applicability, as well as developing and maintaining a list of goals, strategies, and tactics that are being addressed. Staff plans to have an interactive web version of our plan that demonstrates how town initiatives tie into facets of the plan. Accountability falls on all of us, elected and appointed officials, staff, and our community. Excellence Strategy 3.2 says to create our town government to be a center for excellence and encourages us all to monitor and evaluate our work and projects for compliance with the core values. For communication, a good example of how this is handled in our plan is in the connected chapter goal about planning. It speaks to engaging the public across multiple platforms and ensuring citizen participation is an embedded part of town processes. In conclusion, this workshop is your time to talk about any concerns, questions, or comments you have before this comes across the dais for formal adoption procedures. Staff's goal is to make sure you have everything you need so you're ready to approve our plan when it comes before you, and that you have a complete understanding of what our plan is, that you take away knowledge for how to use it for the town and our community. I'd like to now introduce Judd Karstens, who was formerly the Comprehensive Plan Committee Chairman and served as our chairman for the Our Plan Development Team. Thank you, Chairman Christian.
Taylor, before we turn it over to Judd, could you talk to the vision and where we can exactly find that in the document and how that was brought about?
Yes, sir. Certainly. So there's a good synopsis of the vision in the executive summary, which is in the front matter just before section 1 begins. But also in section 1.2, our vision is a good kind of expanded description about the genesis of it through Our Future initiative that began some years ago, I believe in 2017. And that was the project that had about 4,500 hours of community participation to develop a preferred future for Hilton Head Island over the next 20 years. And so that was reinventing sustainability again. So that worked perfectly to roll into the development of our plan because the state requires us to have a vision in the comprehensive plan. Does that answer your question? Or?
Thank you, Taylor.
Sure.
Precisely. And let me tee Judd up here for a second. Judd is a former member of the Planning Commission, and he was appointed to chair the development team that oversaw this entire process. And Judd has shepherded this, and we want to thank Judd for his leadership. And Judd, your comments, please.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Christian. Yes, it was very much an honor to be appointed to be a member of the development team. Though I may have chaired it, me and my 7 members, I think there was it was very much a group effort, and it was fantastic to work with Peter and Mike on that team. As Taylor, I will try to be as eloquent as Taylor and as succinct as possible, but with the appointment of the development team by council, we were charged with keeping the work groups aligned and working through the principles and process. If you look within your packet, page 12 fully outlines the principles and process, but I'll hit on the high notes and the fact that this was meant to help us utilize expertise within our community, namely our public leadership and our anchor institutions, in helping to drive these work groups. The work groups which are founded on those 7 pillars, strategic pillars. Ownership. I think ownership is a large component when it comes to these principles, and the fact that the meetings were open. We were looking for that public feedback. We were looking to leverage and utilize those folks that had the knowledge in all these fields that we were trying to align with the comprehensive plan. And then finally, direction. You know, when it comes to this information and this knowledge, we wanted to give it purpose. We wanted to give it direction in the comprehensive plan. And I think that the work groups were able to do that quite well. Me and the team, we pretty much just synthesized. We were focused on making sure that their efforts in the work groups were focused. And I feel like we were very successful with that. And now, obviously, this is the idea is to perpetuate this, you know, keep this going as a living document, as something that is adaptive, and as Taylor said, accountable, and being able to evaluate and say when something's working or not working as well as we'd like it to. Again, I wanted to keep it as succinct as possible, but I do want to recognize the hard work and the hours that were put in by Ms. Ladd and Ms. Ray. I know as far as our direct staff members that worked with us, as well as all the support staff, definitely the effort put in by our work groups and the Parks and Rec Master Plan Committee. And then finally, my fellow development team members. I appreciate it very much. And then just the gratitude for the council to put the trust in us to help this, produce this document, and the public in general, as far as allowing us to represent them and hopefully help to synthesize and bring their voice to this. So I appreciate everybody's efforts to date. Thank you.
Judd, thank you very much again for your leadership and your comments throughout this process. Can't go on without complimenting Jennifer Ray and Taylor Ladd for their work in putting all of these ideas on paper and actually producing the document that is before you. It is extremely impressive document, both visually and in content. And many folks have said, oh, well, once this is adopted in whichever form it takes and whatever amendments are given, what happens to it? Well, this document is used by town council and by the planning commission as a litmus test for most everything that we do and most everything that is passed. So it is an extremely important document and a living document, as Judd indicated. At this time, we're going to go through each of the members of the town council and solicit their comments, so staff can listen and see how they feel the document fits into their vision of our future, and if we need to make any tweaks to it. Mayor McCann, you are first up.
Thank you, Peter. First of all, Peter, I'd like to thank you for putting this joint meeting together. I'd like to thank Taylor and Sean for all their work in this year, as well as all the town staff and the thousands of hours the community has put into this. This is a living document that will be here long after most of us are gone. This is a living document that will direct the town and the town energies and resources for the next 20 years along the way. We appreciate all the work, and I think it's a great document. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you, Mayor McCann. Mark Grant, council member.
Hello, how you doing this morning? I want to say that I think that, the whole staff did a very good job with this comprehensive plan. And I do recognize that this is a plan that will continue to grow and be used through many town councils. But one thing I would add, as I was reading through it and looking through it, I thought that we do a great deal with our parks and recreation, and it's very detailed. And I recognize that because we have to have a plan in terms of what we want to do with the town's land, okay? And trying to meet the needs of the entire community and see what things our community and our citizens are invested in and would like to see happen. However, one thing I would encourage as we move forward is I think we need to have an area in this book that talks about specifically Native Island, Gullah issues, task force specifics. Right now, it's sprinkled throughout, okay? I feel like if we embrace our challenges, that will make Hilton Head a better place. And my question is too, and this in terms of overall, the low country area stretching from DC down to Florida, how are the countries or the states addressing indigenous people along the coastal area in terms of the Gullah Geechee culture? Okay, I think this is where we could stand up and say, look, the Gullah Task Force is one of the things that we implemented in terms of the town of Hilton Head. On page 38, they wrote out all the issues and how we're working on addressing it. So if we put this online and somebody wants to look at, well, what is Hilton Head doing compared to Tybee Island or St. Helena? They don't have to go read the whole book. They can go to a specific section and address those issues, and talk about those issues. And then we say, look, this is what we want to accomplish as the town council this year, in year 2 or year 3 or year 4, based on some of the initiatives that's been presented. And I know that this is a working document. But however, I just think that's something that we could add to improve on it, And then too, I thought too, the workforce housing was a good portion, a very good portion. How we're going to address that, I think that's a very positive thing, because my thing is too, Hilton Head has to have a middle class community, okay? And the reason why I say that is because there's a variety of people who do a great service on this island. How are we going to address teachers? How are we going to address fire department? How are we going to address staff members who work hard, who wants to live on Hilton Head and reap the benefits? So those are the things that I think that, we continue to work on, continue to improve on in this document. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Grant, for those comments. Councilmember Ames.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, all. Three words that Taylor spoke excited me. To exceed expectations. I think that's an incredibly powerful statement to make for our community, our residents, and our businesses. And so I'm really excited about what's been produced, and I think there's tremendous reason for optimism. I see it in a lot of things that I'm dealing with. I would agree with Mr. Grant's comment about workforce housing and Gullah culture. I noticed in looking at the Parks and Rec segment that it was disproportionately detailed in comparison to other areas. And although it mentioned the word culture once, I think culture and history of the island deserve as much attention as Parks and Recs. All three are incredibly important to our community, both from a quality of life standpoint, but also from a tourist destination standpoint. I'd like to make several comments, actually. I think the process did work well, and it integrated the vision about as seamlessly as we could imagine. I think there was enthusiastic public participation of the work groups, and I think that's a very healthy sign. I congratulate the staff for the high quality of work and leadership. And I was very impressed with the amount of valuable information that can be derived from this document. Both Taylor and the chairman mentioned next steps, and that's sort of number one on my list. How is this document used to guide public investment? I think that one of our critical challenges on this island is how do we have targeted strategic investment with our limited public dollars? I counted 220 strategies and 200 tactics in this document. And as Taylor said, each one has an enthusiastic citizen behind it. So I think the council's challenge is figuring out a way that those strategies and tactics can be prioritized so that the business community and the resident community are enthusiastic and in alignment of what we are targeting. I asked the question rhetorically, are these words just on paper? And I think that we have seen over time that decisions can be made without serious regard for the comprehensive plan. And so I think, again, the alignment between the private sector and the public sector, the residents and the businesses are absolutely critical to implementing the vision that has been created and implementing the strategies and tactics. I'm encouraged by what the Chamber has produced with its consultant and its destination management plan, because it is in alignment in so many ways with what this document is trying to accomplish for the community. And I think the fact that that alignment exists today, it is encouraging and sends a message to the private sector that this may be a really ideal place to invest private sector dollars. And I think that's critical to the community as well. In the document, it speaks to a 2040 population of 49,000 people. We're approximately at 3940 right now. So about a 25% increase over that period of time. And again, I, in some ways rhetorically, but also seriously, ask the question, why must population increase? And I think that's really a core issue for staff and council and the town community to think about. Because if it does think that population needs to increase, then what kind of housing will satisfy that need? And again, this gets into the situation that if we are going to increase by 10,000 homes or 10,000 people over the next 20 years, are those going to be people who can work on this island and serve the community in an integral and necessary way, or are they going to be additional people who require services? And so I think the workforce housing component of this document and our commitment to it as a public, as a community, is a very serious commitment and really holds sort of in balance where this community goes from here. I'll add one other thing regarding growth. We have always espoused a stewardship of the natural environment, and growth and the environment are not in alignment as I see it. We can overcome our physical impacts by dollars. In other words, we can build more roads, or we can build more drainage ditches, and so on. So I think another very serious strategic question is, how are we going to balance the cost to our community to grow? What burden are we going to place on our citizens to accommodate the impacts of growth, and how are we going to preserve our environment to the greatest extent possible? I noticed that in the document there was a graph of land use acreages by zoning categories. And I ask the question, does the zoning map that we have today reflect the real demand for commercial property in today's and tomorrow's market? Why is that important? Because our future viability as a community depends on having concentration of activities for the benefit of transportation, congregating, and so on. Our 1980s, basically, zoning map anticipated far more commercial on the island than what we need today. And so I think a strategic challenge that we have embedded in this land use plan, in this comprehensive plan, is the issue of balancing our zoning districts to today's and tomorrow's marketplace. I think those are my comments at this time. I again say that this document is a reason for the community's optimism. I think the staff and the public who participated have done a tremendous job. Now it's a serious challenge for council to figure out a way that we can prioritize 220 strategies and 200 tactics in a way that the community is behind that prioritization. Thank you.
David, thank you for those very, very in-depth and thoughtful comments. Councilmember Becker.
Hi, good morning. So first I wanted to acknowledge that I had the absolute pleasure to sit in on many of the committee meetings that were held in roundtable discussion about the elements going into the plan. And I wanted to personally thank all those people who gave up all those hours and used their time to help grow in this Hilton Head community and to ensure that the town of Hilton Head going into the future is the very best in the world that we can be. And they sure did work hard, and I appreciate them and thank you. Having said that, one of the things that I think might be different and you can about this plan versus those in the past, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that those meeting details and thoughts were pulled together instead of by each group in a writing that was then put together as a book, a plan. Instead, those ideas and those comments were taken by staff and the book was generated, the plan was generated. Am I correct in that?
Just about. There is still a lot of public input that went into how this was pieced together, and Planning Commission was embedded throughout the whole process.
Okay. All right, and I guess that's the answer I was looking for. I just want to ensure, and having said in the meetings, much of this is absolutely, as I recall, the thoughtfulness that went into those comments. But I just want to ensure that those people's thoughts, concerns, and vision for the future are reflected throughout this book, and that they've also signed off on each of those sections. So having said that, I'm going to go back to one of the comments that I think I made during those meetings that I still believe is true. We use the term best in class, and I know that there was discussion around how to word our idea of excellence. Best in class to me, unless we define what our class is, really doesn't really give us that measuring point. I still believe strongly that Hilton, and I love this town, so maybe I'm very biased, but I believe Hilton Head Island is and should be the most excellent, the best of every community throughout this world, and that we strive not to be best in class, but to be the best, the most excellent. And I think this term limits us in some ways. And so again, I would ask for some consideration for defining it clearly or re-emphasizing that we're not limited to whatever class we seem to see ourselves put into, but the very best in the world. So that's my humble opinion on that matter again. The other thing that I just want to, and I go a little bit, I don't have any long-winded speech or thoughts other than our future looks bright. I'm impressed and proud and honored to be part of a group in the town, have so many thoughtful people who care so deeply. Parks and Rec is an area that is extremely well defined in here, relies on a plan that has not been fully adopted yet. But having said that, some of the things that I'm concerned about that are written into the documents are things that I've discussed before that are not necessarily, as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, accurate. And one has to do with that on July 1st that we took over the maintenance and all of those issues. And I believe you'll find that around page 223. That also, so that concerns me, that we keep saying something that I'm not sure where it came from. And it's particularly concerning to me at this point, not that I don't think we should. I quite frankly do believe that we should be responsible for our parks, for our citizens, for our youth and our population, so that we have the very best facilities in the world and that they're maintained that way. That's not the issue. My issue is greater than that. My issue is citing things that I'm not sure where the where it comes from. And secondly, especially in light of where we are with other negotiations. So for me, having that document in this form at this time is not something that I can endorse, even though it is ultimately what I would want to see as the actual plan for Parks and Rec. So hopefully that'll be resolved quickly and thoroughly. And then the only other comment I have with regard to Parks and Rec is that on page 218 to 19, there is a map and some listings of parks. And I'm not sure the numbers correspond to actual locations. Seems to be quite a few errors in there. So that needs to be adjusted. The other question I have on that is the classifications. And I think I wrote it down, so it should regional. So on the classifications, if I could just get a little bit more information about that, I would appreciate it. It seems we have, and it seems in light actually of the other comments that I made with regard to parks, that we have regional park number 28, I guess, on page 218 or 219, that are low country celebration. Just explain to me what regional park means. What is a regional park?
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Becker. So on page 217, there's a list of all the park classifications with a description that explains what they are. And typically a regional park is, actually a lot of our parks are regional parks because we do draw folks from the region in through them, such as some of our beach parks. And something like Low Country Celebration Park or Coligny Beach Park, for example, can be considered regional parks. Because they do draw folks from a greater service area and radius than just the island itself, as opposed to like a mini park that services more of a neighborhood. So the way the park classifications work is there are lots of parks that cross over into many different classifications. And so we had to pick a classification that we felt was the highest and best representation of what that park is. But there is some flexibility to understand that some of the parks, depending on what their use is like in a particular time or day or time of year, can fit into different classifications. So Low Country Celebration Park, by the essence of what it will be and what it will draw, and the opportunities that we have to host events and things like that will pull people in from outside of the island community, we did fit that in as a regional park.
Is there a requirement to have a regional park listed?
There's no requirement for that. It's just how our consultant who worked with us on the Parks and Rec master plan that went into that was the foundation for this part of our plan. That's just kind of how the conversation went with them on that matter. It can be a community park, certainly.
And from my perspective, since this is our plan for the town of Hilton Head Island and it's our tax dollars and it's our resources that will maintain it, unless we're having some value added in terms of that sort of thing from others, that's the way I looked at it. I looked at it in terms of those aspects. And so from my perspective, I would prefer it wasn't listed as a regional park. So enough on that. And then I'm trying to find the page, and I thought I jotted it down, but I don't have the specific page to help you with. But there's also reference to future parks. And I'm curious as to why there are it's right here. It's on page 219. Future Mid-Island Park is one, future Taylor Park, future Patterson Park. I'm curious as to why specific parks were added in as listed for the future.
Certainly. So on page 234 and 235, we have our gap analysis for existing and proposed parks. So we included those future parks in the overall park map, which I'm aware that was my mistake. I have the wrong map in there. I do have a map with the correct numbers on there that I will definitely fix that. I apologize for that confusion. But these on 234 and 235, the map on the left on 234 shows our existing service area on the island based on mini parks, neighborhood parks, community parks, and the Island Rec Center. And on the right, that map shows that when we include the proposed mini parks, Taylor and Patterson, as well as Mid-Island Park, and we make changes to Crossings Park, that shows how much the service area of these parks expands across the island and encompasses more communities and residents. So we wanted to kind of draw the correlation and label on the parks map the future parks that will come into play later on, and definitely bring to fruition what is shown on this gap analysis map for existing and proposed parks.
So is that the extent of the parks that were shown, these three?
Yes. Yes, on the future map, yes, ma'am.
But in the gap analysis, was it just those three areas that were? I'm just curious how inclusive, how complete this map is with regard to that sort of.
Well, our Parks and Rec consultant produced these maps, so I redid them for our plan. So this is based on what's in the master plan that they put together. I just correlated these across. So it is based on pretty extensive statistical analysis and research and data input.
So I guess it just kind of falls into what my overall concern is, and whether or not it's a big concern or not is not the point. It's just that I realize we're doing a lot of things at one time. So as that Parks and Rec plan comes forward to be reviewed by Town Council and then approved, how will any changes, if any, that get made in that process be reflected back into the plan? My point is, it makes an assumption that we're there and we're not necessarily there. And
right.
Two documents can be done at the same time with expectations. I'm just now today looking at it.
Sure. So what's in section 4 of our plan is a reflection of what we got from the consultant, the report we got from them, and then it was vetted by our Parks and Rec task group, and then the Parks and Rec Commission. So what is in section 4 is a result of those two groups of people vetting what we got from the consultant. And they did actually look at this section and provided feedback. And as well, we incorporated a lot of public comment into this section in our plan to be reflective of the community and the area experts that we invited into the process. However, when the Parks and Rec master plan comes before you for consideration to adopt it, if there are things that you would like to see altered in our plan that you don't agree with in the Parks and Rec master plan that we got from Lowe's Design, then I can certainly make changes to our plan to reflect what you're concerned about.
Sure, and I'm not sure I really have a concern. It was just more of a question. And whether or not there may be additions, right? Have we limited ourselves? Are there other things that through the conversation will become a priority and important to insert? That's really my driving question. And you can point out to me if it's listed in here, and I don't want to not mention it. Is there a reference to specific? I know there are references to different types of athletic opportunities and growth. Is there anything that specifically mentions pickleball in here as a priority?
Yes, ma'am, there is. It's in the recreation section.
Mhm.
Let's see.
It's okay.
Oh, sure.
I just
It
want to
is.
make sure that I've
Yeah.
asked
If
and
you
that it
you look in the
is.
index, you can definitely see that all the pages where pickleball is listed. There's
That's
a
all.
lot.
I want to make sure that we've had that conversation.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Then that was really, for the most part, other than some minor tweaking and little things that I just wanted to address. Thank you. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just wanted to address a couple of things that Ms. Becker brought up. Concerning the maintenance of the parks and how that is being managed, the language in our plan will be updated to reflect with what is actually happening when this comes up for adoption. So what's in here now is what I knew at the time based on news releases and what was happening at Town Hall. Now, if that changes, the language in our plan will certainly be a reflection of exactly what is happening at the time of adoption. So I just wanted to make sure you're aware of that at this point in time between this was released to the public and today, we've had changes to what's in here about park maintenance. And then I'd like to draw your attention to, on page 299, we have a definition in here for best in class. So once you have a chance to review that, I welcome your feedback on that as well. Best in class is one of our goal keywords. And so we felt it was important to provide a definition for that.
So on page 299, Taylor?
Yes,
Did I
ma'am, in the
miss that?
definition section. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And thank you, Councilmember Becker, and Taylor. Thank you for your clarifications. Taylor, we also update this document in the interim, do we not? On a 5-year interval, it's not a total rewrite, but it gets a read over by the Planning Commission and the Comprehensive Planning Committee, and then goes back to Council. So again, this is a living document. There is plenty of opportunity to tweak it as we move it along. All right, Councilmember Lennox.
Thank you, Peter. Peter, I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge the town staff and Taylor and Jennifer for all the hard work in keeping this thing moving forward. And also to your Planning Commission, Peter, under your leadership, and the Comp Plan Committee under Mike's leadership. I'd also like to acknowledge our plan development team, the 7R core value work groups, the Parks and Rec Commission, the Parks and Rec Task Force, the dozens and dozens of anchor institutions and contributing organizations, and to all those in the community that participated in creating what in essence really is the town's program of work. Taylor, you addressed many of the questions and issues that I had in your opening comments, but I'd like to also take a couple minutes and go section by section, starting with the executive summary. I think the way you tie the vision together with the revitalization and modernization comments, along with the inclusive and diversity comments, is very, very effective. I think that should be used in tandem every time we talk about the vision. Your comments on strategies and tactics, filtering those through the 10 elements, using the core values is the proper application of that process. And I think late in the executive summary, you define the purpose very, very effectively. Under the purpose and process section on page 12, the last bullet, you reference a celebration. Taylor, that may be a very effective way to address accountability. And I think we can discuss that a lot more, but the celebration or the report to the community from the mayor and the town manager may be a way that we can address accountability. Our community section, I've never seen anything so effectively compiled as that. That should be required reading for every new resident of the town of Hilton Head Island. Core values section on page 97. You reference 3 bullets as strategic outcomes. Those, in essence, are the 3 goals that Town Council established 2 years ago. I think we need to make those outcomes or goals conspicuous in the comp plan. In the Parks and Recreation section, there is a progression starting on page 250, going through page 265, starting with goals, strategies, tactics, initial recommendations, final recommendations, and action items. I think I need more clarity on how they all link to the comp plan. And I did an inventory similar to what David did of the goals, strategies, and tactics in the entire document. There's around 50 goals, 275 strategies, and 343 tactics, all very appropriate in the comp plan. The challenge that we as a group that touch the comp plan will be, how do we manage the process? How do we determine what is working and what isn't, which leads me to the comments that you very appropriately made in the beginning. As a council, working with the Planning Commission and working with the staff and certainly working with the community, we need to find a way to prioritize, measure the performance, assign accountability, and most importantly, communicate with the community. I think you've done a lot of the heavy lifting in defining our program of work very effectively in this document. Now, the 4 elements yet to be done will define how effective we are in implementing this. Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you, Councilmember Lennox. Councilmember Stanford.
Thank you, Peter. I want to echo the congratulations to Taylor, Jennifer, and the entire staff for creating a momentous document. It is spectacular in its scope. It's a lot to digest, frankly. So I do congratulate those people, and I express appreciation to the many citizens and citizens groups who made contributions to this effort. I attended many of the work sessions of the work groups, and I found all of the citizens to be engaged, creative, and very caring. That has led to this beautiful, spectacular document. I do have a couple of nuts and bolts questions. Taylor, you'll recall when this first came up about 3 years ago, I challenged you and others about how the 9 elements would be integrated into this plan. I know that they are, but frankly, I am concerned about some bureaucrat, if they ever look at these things in the state, saying, well, where are the elements that are required by the statute? I'm not sure that there is a chart in this document that shows where the elements are found. If there is, I apologize for making the comment. If there's not, I think we should develop such a chart to make it clear. I agree that we have excellent community alignment here, and I love the fact that this happens at the same time as the Chamber's destination marketing plan. Like David Ames, I am concerned about growth and exactly where we're going. Reinventing sustainability again is a worthy term, And I realize you can dig deeper into the vision and into this, but I'm wondering if maybe this plan should start to point to directions we might go. For example, is the town of Hilton Head Island going to become more of a bedroom community and less of a commercial center? I think the answer is yes to that, but there are no doubt other directions that we could point to, because we have to know where we're going in order to get there. And that's obvious to every one of us. I'm concerned about the growth in population. I see, frankly, the town to be effectively built out. Yes, there are some things that, some places where we can have more growth, and we are looking at a repurposing commercial space. And I think that that is mentioned in here, but it is something that definitely needs to be a focus of our vision and plan so that we can adapt those sometimes poor condition buildings and put them to proper use or remove them entirely. In the sustainability section, I don't think I saw the term recycling. I think a failure of this entire community is to have an effective recycling program. If it's there, I apologize for not identifying it, but I do think that that is a key element of sustainability that is missing in our community right now today. We know that we have visitors who come here used to recycling at home and are shocked to find that there's no effective recycling program. I know it's been tried in the past and didn't work, but I don't give up on that, and I think it is a focus that we need to deal with. I agree with Mark Grant's comments about the value and importance of the Native Islander community, and I think that some of that can be developed more fully as well. In terms of nuts and bolts, your strategies and tactics are outstanding, but they're also voluminous. And we need to have a way to break those down. And frankly, the way that occurs to me is that when a matter comes before the Planning Commission for action, or when a matter comes before the Town Council for action, that part of the report to either of those bodies or both of those bodies identify which strategy and tactic is being implemented in that particular action. That way, to me, the comprehensive plan becomes much more of a living document. So I would suggest that we consider doing that as well. I look forward to, you referred to an interactive document. It is much easier to keep up with something that is electronic these days so that we can go straight to, for example, the word recycling that I mentioned a few minutes ago. And I realize that that will be coming along. But I recall from the very beginning when you were talking about this several years ago, talking about condensing it down to have a much smaller version of it that could be used to give to new citizens and residents of the island, and that each of us could carry around with us so that we could keep it front and center in our minds. And so I look forward to something like that. I realize it's not going to get shrunken down to a phrase, but I think it can be condensed in an electronic way that'll make it very usable, because I'm not sure we're using our current comprehensive plan in day-to-day activities of the town. So again, I appreciate the enormous effort and work that you and your colleagues have put into it, and I sincerely appreciate those efforts. Those are my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Stanford. All right, we will.
Oh, sorry, please go ahead.
Sure. Taylor, do you want to answer any of Councilmember Stanford's questions?
Very quickly, on the matter of recycling, we actually had a representative from the I2 Recycling Company in the Environment Work Group, and we have an entire goal on page 115 in that chapter about waste, and specifically strategy 1.4 on that page talks about recycling. So I just wanted to make you aware it's in there. And then also, I don't know if you can see this, huh? Oh, there's a delay.
Yeah.
Huh?
You're fine. Keep
Oh,
going.
there is we're working on this guidebook to provide all of you guys a handy, small version, kind of, I guess, Cliff Notes version of our plan so that you can have quick access to the goals and specific key points about our plan. But of course, we will be working on an online interactive version as well, where you'll be able to flip-flop between the elements and the core values to see kind of where everything lines up. But I do agree with you about charting specifically the elements. At this time in the appendix, we do have consolidated all of the core value and element relational matrices, starting on page 326. So that way you can kind of see quickly where housing works with a certain core value, or you can find where the elements fit in. But I can look into flip-flopping this so that you can go to housing and see which core values work with it. So thank you very much for your comments.
Excellent. Thank you.
Peter?
David, did you have your hand raised, Councilmember Ames?
I did. May I? I'd like to echo what Ms. Becker said about the regional park. I think that nomenclature suggests something that maybe we as a council ought to be thinking about. I think there's a messaging in there that works against our desire to manage traffic and congestion. So I would echo what Tammy said about that. Secondly, I've noted some area items that need corrections, details, and I'll simply get them to you, Taylor. Question for you, Taylor. If a council in a year and a half wants to amend the comprehensive plan for whatever reason, is that permitted by state ordinance, or do we have to wait until the 5-year anniversary?
You do not have to wait for the 5 years. It's just at least every 5 years, the state asks you to, at a minimum, take a look and see if anything needs to be refreshed. But certainly the comprehensive plan for the town can be revised at any point in time. You just have to go through the standard public hearing process and adoption and, get public input and all that. But yes, absolutely no problem.
Thank you. My final comment, again, is to repeat what I said at the very beginning, to exceed expectations. If we as a community can exceed expectations, we build property values and create opportunities for business. So I really think that should be in the minds of our citizens and our businesses, to exceed expectations. How we treat people on the street, how we treat people when they're in a store, it says so much about who we are as a community if we're always striving to exceed expectations. Thank you for bringing that up, Taylor.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Ames. In the interest of time, I know the commissioners are on deck next for any comments they may have, but I don't want to miss any secondary comments that a council member may have at this time. Is there any other council member who would like to interject at this time before we go through the commissioners?
Peter, I don't really have anything terrifically important to say that's not been said by other council members, but I do want to emphasize the aspect of deliberate consideration and conservative management on any future development for the island. Thanks.
Thank you for those comments, Councilmember Becker. Okay, we will move it on to the commissioners. Mike Scanlon, you're up if you have any comments.
Yes, thank you, Peter. And I want to thank the interest of the mayor and the town council in this area. I think I have, as a member of the development team and as the chair of the comprehensive plan committee of the planning commission, I have thanked and congratulated our staff numerous times for the work here. As looking ahead for the next 20 years, I think the thing of major concern to me is that we have got into the 99th percentile in terms of this plan as to those things that are under the control of the town. But I come from maybe more of a corporate background in planning. I always look at a SWOT analysis as my way of approaching things. And I don't mean to go out of bounds here, but I do think that we do need a mechanism in our plan and in our planning for those things that maybe we don't control, but maybe we should be influencing. And as I use as the main example of that is the topic of healthcare. We're not going to be, I think we're losing status as a destination and as a place to retire and live because we probably maybe don't control things in the area of healthcare, but maybe we should be doing more to influence things in healthcare. I don't think our status as an island is going to be measured in 20 years by the number of pickleball courts we have, but what kind of healthcare do we offer our residents, our citizens? And that is of major concern to me. People on this island find a very difficult time finding primary health care providers. Concierge services are way too high for many people. And I can tell you there's not an endocrinologist within an hour and a half of this island. I do think that what we need here is a mechanism so that we can influence other things that are going to affect our next 20 years. If you look at a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, I think the biggest threat to this island in terms of its status in the future is our healthcare. And I do think that we should be doing more to lead the way and to influence that sector, even though we don't control it and probably never will. So I say that to you because if we want a comprehensive plan, I think we have to look at other things outside of just what we control. I think we've done a magnificent job of addressing the things that the town can control. I want to make that point. But I do think that we do need some sort of a mechanism in this plan to reflect on and to find ways to influence those things we don't control, but we ought to be totally aware of, and things that can make this island a better place for everyone. So I thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Scanlon. Commissioner Perry. Alan?
Thank you, Peter. First of all, and everybody has said this, and what a great representation that this document shows on the quality of staff that we have at town. This is an exciting document that really is going to propel us forward. We need to redefine our town. We need to focus on those strengths that we have and build upon the weaknesses and make them stronger. Going back and looking at a couple of the comments, as Mr. Grant said, embrace challenges. And that is something that we really need to do. And the heritage and the history of this island is utmost important to its cultural life. And we talk about changing tourism and less impact tourism. And I think by embracing our heritage and our history will allow us to do that. To exceed expectations. That is something that this island used to do a long, long time ago. And when we talk about environmental sustainability, we exceeded expectations, and we need to get back to that point. So I think that's a great area to focus on. The 3 strategic outcomes, exceptional quality of life. I like to see that say exceptional quality of life for all. We we talk about workforce housing, and all we really talk about there is services, hospitality. We need to focus on the teachers, the nurses, the retail stores, and everybody else so that we know that we're including every aspect of this community. Prosperity and innovation. Everybody wants to prosper. And a middle-class society often moves up to a higher-class society. It always is improving the quality of life that we have. Best-in-class services and facilities, that goes right in line with medical care and the influence that Mr. Scanlon was talking about. I think what we can do there and need to address is working with our community partners, both within Hilton Head, Bluffton, Okatee, Beaufort, Savannah, to be that somewhat center of influence to help drive some of that best-in-class services that we may not be able to have on the island. We need to be a leader within the community, the low country, to help drive that. I think one of the things that this document does that is absolutely fantastic, because of the input that has been given by so many individuals of so many different sectors of this community, is transparency. And when we have that public input to a transparent document, it forces the hand to act within reason and in guidance of the document. And I think once we get that document to a interactive document, it'll be more cohesive to allow us to integrate that into the decision making that's going to go through the Planning Commission and through Town Council. And it's going to shape the lives of this island for a long time. Town Council and staff needs to be the center for excellence. And I think that the workforce housing document is the first element that shows excellence. It was well thought out, it was well discussed, and it was well implemented. Well, it'll be well implemented. And that center of excellence will help drive us forward into everything that we do and everything that we try to accomplish, whether it be housing, workforce housing, recreation, or anything else that we decide to do, recycling. So I think it is a wonderful document, and I don't want to see it put back for any major changes that have maybe been discussed today, but some amendments. But I think it's absolutely spot on. And one last thing I will say into Mike's comment of a SWAT, I think that's a great idea to implement that, because that'll help guide us as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Perry. Councilmember O'Neill. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr.
Commissioner
Chairman.
O'Neill.
Yeah, don't put me there, please. Three points really that I'd like to make. The first, that in terms of the process, I had the opportunity to sit at every level of it. I sat at the Vision Project Management team and all the way up to Planning Commission, the Comprehensive Planning Committee, the work groups. And, I know we've all complimented Taylor and her staff, but my goodness, at every point, when comments have been raised, they've been treated. They haven't all been included in the plan, obviously, but they've been looked at carefully and responded to. And I think that's just been exceeding expectations, as was said before. So it was a very good process. And as I watched the plan develop, when people were giving feedback, I saw a real sensitivity there that supports that thought of transparency all the way through. The second thing I would mention is the Parks and Rec piece, which I've spoken with Heather and others about how that came together. And that group of people is really very hardworking and supports the Parks and Rec plan in a way that I think we should too. And then finally, I can't help but comment on Mike's comment, because it's right on the Mike Scanlon. It's right on in terms of the influence that the council has in many areas that it doesn't necessarily control. I, of course, am prejudiced on the healthcare end and take every opportunity that I can, even though I've been away from it for 6 or 7 years, to point out that our healthcare system, including the hospital, the doctors, the ancillary things. I know enough about it to know that for an island this size, we should be protecting and working for and supporting the doctors, the nurses, and all of the peripheral stuff that comes along with a good healthcare system. I know of no other on the East Coast, with the possible exception of Cape Cod. And we spent a lot of time trying to say that, and so I take every opportunity to say it in a way that if you took away the economic impact that our hospital and doctors have on this community, you would take away well in excess of $100 million of annual input into this community. So it's a diamond in the rough. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to say that because Mike is right. You have to influence the development of those items. And so I'm fully supportive of this plan, the process, and look forward to pushing it across the finish line. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. Our Vice Chairman and Commissioner Stevens, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello to everyone. I will just very quickly echo the sentiments that have already been expressed about the hard work from Taylor Ladd and Jennifer Ray and the staff and those who were on that visioning process to get this whole thing started. And was also happy to participate in one of the groups and attended some of the other gatherings as well. I want to I have a couple of questions, I think, to begin with. There is a reference in the historical section on page 43 to the churches that came out of the First African Baptist Church, and it says that there was a Goodwill Church. I'm not familiar with that, and just wanted to see if we knew where that came from. That was maybe one of the previous names of the churches, but I'm not familiar with Goodwill Church, just as a point of making sure we have correct historical information in there. Do we know where that came from?
I'm sorry, could you say again which page, sir?
Page 43. It listed some of the historical churches that came out of.
Not 43. Maybe 23. Yes. So.
23.
Yeah. Oh, that's okay. Yes, sir. Under the 1865 marker on the timeline. Goodwill, Central Oak Grove, Mount Calvary, and St. James. So that came off of the town's timeline that's posted on our website, which was compiled based on archival information and with assistance from the Coastal Discovery Museum through interviews with locals and things like that over time. So that's kind of where I got this information, and if it's inaccurate, then I certainly would be happy to edit it. But this timeline and historical information about the island's history was vetted by several people. But certainly if you find a reference where this is incorrect, I'm happy to revise it.
Well, it's just a question. I don't tend to know all of the history, but when it comes to the churches, I thought I knew most of the churches that came out of the First African Baptist. The other part was in the public arts venues, I think. I thought that it might be good to have the addition of the basket weaving there at Honeyhorn as well. I believe that Michael Smalls is the artist up there. Just kind of going back over some of those things. And the group that I had the pleasure and opportunity to work in was the Connected, the group that was the Connected group. We had many good discussions about how to be connected. And from what I've heard from our councilmen and some of my colleagues on the Planning Commission, those are the kind of things we talk about in different areas, but still there is a sense of having some cohesion when we talk about a comprehensive plan, and certainly a plan of this magnitude as we try to tie all of these pieces and parts together. This is a massive piece of work, so I don't mean to sound critical, but I do have just some input and observations because I know from my little corner of how much work went into soliciting participation from the community. And that's always a challenge because if you have, 20 people in a room, you've got 20 different opinions. But I think that what we've done to pull this body of work together is a massive piece of work, and it will hopefully be a good place for us to start to address some of these things, that they become more than just, words on a page. I was looking through the section of the Hispanic section as well, and I'm assuming that you also had some input and consultants from that community to guide you on some of that language. I thought it was pretty good. I'm a little concerned about, just addressing certain populations and folks as, maybe just wage earners or however that language is in there. I recognize that through our own cultures, that many people, though they may have folks who are low-wage earners, they also have folks who are entrepreneurs and business owners as well. So I think we should always recognize that that part of any cultural group. So I just make that observation for you as how we address that population. And I noticed that on the diversity graph, the Hispanic population is actually larger than the African American population here. Some of the work that I'm doing with the Gullah Geechee Task Force, what we look at, as Councilman Grant and I believe some others have already said, certainly is something that ought to be brought to the forefront. When I think about a connected group, I think that when we are doing right by all of the people, that it is better for all of us, not just those of us who happen to be okay, so to speak, in our different communities. When we think about the visitors that come here, yeah, I have those same concerns too about where everybody's going. I'm in the entertainment business, so I don't mind seeing a crowd, but the question is, how are we going to manage those folks coming here? And when that industry becomes more important than actually the quality of life that we have here already, certainly with the cultural concerns that we have. And when we talk about culture, I think about several different things. Certainly we have our Gullah Geechee culture as far as a way of life, but there are other cultures that exist on our island when it comes to the arts and entertainment that I've been very fortunate to participate in. So we think about those types of things too. We talk about the venues that we have and where these arts and entertainment activities might take place. As you can see, there's still a very common language with being connected as it relates to even parks and recreation and what we do with those types of locations. In the section, and I don't know if my page numbers are different than what you have here. Maybe they come up different on my computer. But in my notes, I had it as page 84, impediments to fair housing. And the reason that jumped out to me, because just a few of those items that were mentioned were heirs property, gentrification, and political will. And there's definitely some connection to just those items, but there's several items there that were mentioned that I think ought to give our town council some encouragement And I believe, as someone has already said before, that even though these may be things that are beyond our purview, that we ought to be a body that can influence those decisions that are beyond our town limits, if there's at a county level or a state level, or even some of our federal policies that need to be addressed. It's hard for us to do that as just citizens of the community. But I think when a municipality brings that up, it has a little bit more political will, if you will. The last section I wanted to mention is the economic development piece. And knowing that some of the challenges that we have with our, as we say, wage workers, which truly do exist, and affordable housing, and even as it relates to what people are able to do with their land. Many of these things, once again, I'm not going to say I hate to sound like a broken record, because I think I need to sound like a broken record. But as we look at the economic development pieces, we can see how it's connected to some of the other areas of what people can do with their land and how they can be, how they can sustain themselves to be here. For my brothers and sisters in the native island areas, but also in other areas too. And that's why I keep saying that if we resolve some of these issues with our Gullah Geechee Task Force, I think it will benefit a lot of people on the island as well. So that if we are all doing well, then everybody can be prosperous. We can be sustainable where we are, and we can enjoy this island, and it can be the best in class or the best of. But I agree with Councilwoman Becker earlier. If we say those things, then we really need to be at the top of the class, or just the best that we can be, period. So as I continue to read through this document, I haven't gone through all 370 pages. I've been skimming back and forth through it, but I think it is a great reference. And I hope that this will be something that will encourage us as the Planning Commission, and as we move forward to Town Council, that we'll be encouraged to not only have this as a great document to read through, but as we've already said, this is a living document. There's a lot of work in here that can be done. And that, in my opinion, should be more than just wordsmithing and saying it a certain way. If we put those words on the paper, then I hope we get some legs behind it, and that should empower our town council and others in the community to go forward and make this a better place for all of us. I'll stop right there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens, for those thoughtful comments. Commissioner McGowan, Leslie.
Yes, good morning. First I want to say the number of comments I have is not as long as it would have been, being that, I don't know, 12th or 13th person to speak now. But I have to say that I have agreed with all the comments that have preceded me. I want to start out once again thanking and just admiring the gargantuan job that the staff has done. This has been transparent and incredibly inclusive process. I look forward to when I can go through the document interactively, though, because as mentioned previously, we need a prioritization and refinement of the strategies and tactics, and perhaps when we can do that interactively, it'll be easier to use the document when we need to evaluate whether it's a matter before the Planning Commission or Council. I really enjoyed the section on history. I think going through the document, I've learned a lot about the island. One area that I felt maybe I couldn't find it, but environmental sustainability, there's no reference to the source of our drinking water, the capacity, quality. Maybe I missed that, but I think that goes along with our heritage as being environmentally sustainable. I think the data, I would like to see that data. One in the section on infrastructure, and maybe this will happen when you are interactive, but I feel that there should be more reference to the future reconstruction of the bridge to the island. It has a huge impact on land use. Just has a huge impact on the island, and I think that whether we include some criteria for the selection of the option for reconstruction or what, the plan's going to have to be amended sooner rather than later to address that choice. I'm also concerned that in the economy section, that there's going to be some changes with vacant businesses as a result of the pandemic. So it's going to have to be an active, dynamic document. I think for some of these things, the infrastructure with the bridge and with the economy, and even when the flood zone is updated, I think that waiting 5 years is going to be just too long in order for the document to be the resource we need it to be. That's all I have at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McGowan. Commissioner Alfred.
Yes, like the others, I want to congratulate Taylor and the staff. I am extremely impressed both by the process and the document. They are outstanding. There were two comments that were made by previously that I would like to emphasize. First was David Ames when he was reviewing the recreation materials and made reference to culture. I too believe that culture is a very important aspect of the Hilton Head community, not just for our residents, but to attract new people and tourists. And I also wanted to second Mike Scanlon's comment about the need to spend more emphasis on healthcare. That's all I have at the present. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Alfred. Commissioner Theodore.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, I'd like to reiterate congratulations and thank you to staff and all the people involved in during this process. I was looking back at the document and it looked like it really kind of started in 2015, so 5 years ago, and the hurricane obviously put a delay to it, but starting in March of 2017, our future started. So it's been quite a process and a lot of public input. It's amazing how much public input has been gathered during this process. So well done. I'd like to emphasize what Councilman Grant had commented on. I mean, obviously I'm part of the Gullah Geechee task force, so it would be nice to see more emphasis on the culture and the history of Hilton Head and recognition of the Native Islanders. And to some degree, what Levon was saying is, I didn't quite feel a strong input or strategies and things like that towards the Hispanic community. I don't know. I just feel like that some of that stakeholder input could be a little stronger. Just a gut instinct on that. I'm glad that the council and some others have commented that when I was going through the document, when I got to the end, some of the tactics and strategies, make a lot of sense, but it's kind of challenging to see how do we move forward with some of those. And then when I got to the Parks and Rec section, it was like, oh, I can feel that moving to the next level. So it did feel like that was weighted more, and obviously because there was a rec master plan study done, and some of that got incorporated into this document. And I wonder if do you try to put as much of that inboard to this document, or do you try to link and reference some of the outcome? Because obviously that still has to go through an adoption process. But it just felt like that had more of a definitive next step processes than some of the other areas. So I just wanted to reiterate sort of that feedback as well. And I think I understand to some degree when I was reading the regional park, it was really that there's certain parks where the tourists that come to the island will use those parks more than some of the other parks. Like the Rowing and Sailing Center is not going to be utilized by most of the tourists that are coming to the island versus Coligny Beach Park or the new park that's being built right now. So that was my interpretation of that. Not necessarily that we're going to build a regional park and we're going to bring in people from all over the southeast just for that. To Councilman Ames' comment about commercial, and where our zoning is today, and is it based on 1980s market and growth, and should that change? And I'm in agreement with that. I do worry that watching a lot of these businesses go dark, are there opportunities to influence that to some level of, are we going to let all of our goods and services leave the island? And then we have to go drive to those, or, are there ways to encourage that, some of that to stay on the island so that it's more sustainable, it's accessible, and it's more of a sort of a neighborhood type business rather than having to go afar to do your shopping and things like that. So, and that kind of goes towards even education. We're going to let a lot of our schools, the Christian academies leaving the island. I hear rumors of, off and on of some of the other schools potentially wanting to leave the island. And what does that mean? Does that mean we're an aging community and that the younger families with kids and all that, are they, is it just, it's accepted that, they're going to either live off island or, that kind of stuff. And, that kind of is in conflict with diversity of the island. So I hate to necessarily see that go away. I'm kind of biased that I bought a Honda a few years back, and then the next year Honda moved off the island. So now you got to go, way out almost to 95 to get services for the car. I had a question for Taylor in terms of what is the Human Relations Council? There was a mention about bringing that back. I had never heard of that, so I was kind of curious of what that was.
That was something that was brought up by our development team member, Morris Campbell. He mentioned that as being probably a coalition of neighborhood representatives, and probably Mr. Stevens can speak to this better.
Yeah, I can help you a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. We've had several names over the years, but yeah, Todd, that was just a group of people in the community who would get together. And as I understood it, it was a pretty diverse group that just got together to talk about issues around the community on the island. Quite a few pastors from the various churches, I believe even from the Jewish synagogue, and probably Emory Campbell and people like that. And I think Reverend Williams, the late Reverend Williams, who passed on now, would participate in these kinds of groups and discussions. I believe what that's a reference to.
Yeah. Well, and if the recommendation is to maybe reinstate that, maybe it's worth defining that, a little more of what that was and what it could be or something like that. So I was just kind of curious. I hadn't heard of it, and just wanted to learn more about what that council was represented. there's the section in there that talks about smart infrastructure, smart cities, right size infrastructure, and all that. Not a whole lot of detail into that, so I was kind of confused on what some of that means. I have an idea, but not a whole lot. Even though there's definitions, it's still not quite clear on what some of that represents. So that could be maybe a little more defined. I mean, I would love the opportunity, living on the island as a permanent resident. I sit through some of the traffic lights, and at times when you're off hour, you're still kind of sitting through a traffic light condition that's based on a peak traffic condition. And I know in some other cities, the traffic lights have smart technology where they understand the time of day and the volumes of traffic and all that kind of stuff. And I know that's maybe a little bit of a personal thing, but that it just seems like there's probably better ways to control traffic and manage it through a system that is reactive kind of thing versus I'm assuming that right now all that gets just programmed over different periods of time.
Commissioner Theodore, can I beg your indulgence and just interrupt you, and I will pick up with you, but we are getting very close to the 11 o'clock hour, and I wanted to circle back and give the mayor and Steve Riley, before they need to leave, an opportunity to speak and comment, and then we will pick it back up with you once they have chimed in. So if I could ask either the mayor or Steve, Mr. Mayor, if you would like to go first and provide any comments you have, and then we'll pick it up with Steve.
The only comment I have, and Steve has a couple, is that this document can be changed anytime the council and the community feels it should be changed. So it isn't something that we're stuck with for a long period of time. As someone said, this is a living document, and we should look at it that way. That, there will never be 100% perfect, but if it's 99, we shouldn't hold it up for any reason whatsoever at all. Steve?
Thank you, Mayor.
Steve, before you start, I don't know how many meetings we're all going to be attending where we may have an opportunity to see you, and with this pandemic, it even makes it more difficult to see you unless we're doing it via Zoom. But realizing that you'll be leaving us at the end of the year, I just wanted to comment about the 20 years that I've known you and worked with you through Hurricane Matthew, through all the land buying programs that you have been a part of through so many different councils, and starting this process and your staff leadership. We are forever beholding to all that you've helped all the previous councils and all the previous boards and commissions of the town. And with that, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. I appreciate those kind words, but it's always been about the great team that we have and what they push forward. And this is another example of a great effort, well thought out way to take the vision process and weave it into this. I appreciate all the comments. Yeah, there's some tweaking we can do here, but as the mayor said, there are things that there are always new things, and we just need to be ready to move this forward and react as we see new opportunities and new challenges. But I appreciate all the comments. I appreciate all the work by staff. I hope that we can move this forward, begin to prioritize it, begin to implement it. Frankly, our strength as a community has been that these plans don't sit on the shelf, that they do get implemented, and I hope we never lose that special aspect of ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Town Manager Riley, and thank you for all you do. And I apologize, Commissioner Theodore, for interrupting you, but wanted to make sure we got the mayor and Mr. Riley in before they needed to depart. So the floor is yours again, Commissioner Theodore.
All right, thank you. And I would like to add to the mayor and Steve's comment that I understand, that a lot of work has been done, and this is an incredible document. And I understand, like, these comments are just input. I mean, obviously this is a workshop, but would, like to see this thing get adopted and then know that, it's a living document that's going to change through the process. And like everybody's commenting, hopefully it's more than 5-year intervals and keeping up to date with as things are defined and need trends change and things like that. So pick back up for Taylor. I was looking at the table or the map showing the pathway networks, and then picked up the PUDs, and I don't know how Chairman Christian, how you feel, because obviously you're the general manager of Hilton Head Plantation, but a lot of the pathways that are shown on the map, like say in Hilton Head Plantation, and it looks like possibly in Sea Pines and some other communities, the blue lines, a lot of those are roads. The pathways actually use the roads as well. So, that's a detail, but it certainly makes it look like, Hilton Head Plantation probably has the most pathways on the island with all the blue lines. But a lot of that are roadways that interconnect with pathways as well. So, just an observation. On page 226, there's a table showing towns' goals on the pathway network. There's not a mention of safety in that, and I think it might be important to include recognition of safety. The more pathways that are built, the more important it is to make sure that they're safe. And we've been addressing a lot of those issues, but I think it could be a bullet point as well. It is mentioned on page 252, safety, but I thought that summary there might be good to mention that as well. And then somebody asked about pickleball. Under the recreation, the NRPA measurements talks about tennis. Is that because that they haven't kind of caught up with pickleball as a sport, Taylor?
I believe so. That might be the case. My understanding is things like pickleball and golf were not included because the metrics are measured in a different way from these other sports. But certainly pickleball might be just because the NRPA needs to catch up.
One thing I noticed is because obviously there's areas where that shows that we have an excess amount of certain recreational activities, and obviously on the other end we're devoid. It seems like on Hilton Head, and there's mention to it that we have specialized conditions with the volume of tourists that are on the island, and in some cases we're a destination to some people for tennis lessons and things like that. So I don't know if there's ever consideration of figuring out how to do metrics that are based on localized conditions versus a generalized national measurement. And then probably did some other people's comments. It's a great document. I was trying to think of how do you keep this document from being put on a shelf and say great job, let's move on. And I made some notes about under the sort of the strategy and tactics, some words that there's encourage, promote, study, explore, coordinate, identify, evaluate, pursue, exceed. They're all great words, but I think then the next step is to figure out how to put some metrics and prioritize into those so that we can move those forward and begin to figure out how to implement those, whether there's additional studies like what was done for the Parks and Rec, the master plan, but to kind of figure out a way to advance these and then maybe have some measurements that you can periodically check to see how are we doing with the success of those different strategies and tactics of each of the pillars. So I just feel like there may be some way to make sure that this document is constantly being pulled out and looked at and referencing to see how are we progressing in those areas. So I just throw that out as a comment. On page 252 under strategies, or I think section 5 on pathways, there's mention about advancing the network of pathways on the island. I didn't see an emphasis, and it was mentioned about greenways, that there's a certain type of pathway that's considered a greenway that's measured in a 50-foot wide corridor. And because most of our pathways are on the road networks, they don't have that width, so they don't quite fall into that category. And I believe that as the 278 corridor and some of these other road networks are being addressed in terms of pathways, that we begin to look at secondary corridors, and then in some instances, can those be pulled off from the road network so they become more greenways, and integrated into, how do they connect to the Mid-Island Park and all that kind of stuff that may happen into the future. I just thought, there might be good to have an emphasis on pathways that aren't necessarily road network oriented. And then this is my personal observation. I see reference to the Xeriscape area that's there outside of Town Hall. My observation is, that it's not very well promoted as an educational element for people to look at to see how to conserve water and be more native landscaping versus the ornamental landscapes that we do a lot on the island. And I'm not even sure how you get into that area. I don't know if it connects to the pathways. It tends to feel a little overgrown around the perimeters and stuff. So I'm just throwing that out. I don't know if it's being presented as well as it could be so that people are familiar with it. I just throw that out there. The last comment is, and I think you answered it, Taylor, is that, with the result of the impacts that COVID-19 has had on our community and the recent email that was sent out yesterday about our relationship with the county, it might be good to see how those impact, try to interpret how that is going to impact us over the next number of years, so that somehow that gets incorporated, at least as a starting point, into this document, so that we're prepared to kind of try to begin to deal with some of that. So those are my comments. It's a great document. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Theodore, and thank you all commissioners and town council members who may be departing soon for their next meeting. My comments are just an overview. I agree with, wholeheartedly with the previous comments that were made. My overview, the workforce housing, which is, part of this document, obviously extremely important. The Gullah Geechee Task Force that Vice Chairman LaVarn Stevens chairs, if the council members are still on, I just wanted to point out that both LaVarn and Commissioner Theodore will term out at the end of this year on the Planning Commission, and there will not be any Planning Commission members on that task force. That may be something the town council would like to look at, to assign actual serving commissioners onto that task force, which is extremely valuable. Technology, and Taylor, you have this in here, so important. Cell phone and Wi-Fi services. We are blessed to have several venues to get Wi-Fi service as well as cell service, but that's going to bring the higher end tourists and the higher end full-time resident into our community. And several people have talked about the symbiotic relationship between tourism, full-time residents, and our business community. That can never be overly emphasized and needs to be repeated so our full-time residents realize that the quality of life that they enjoy and the tax advantages that they enjoy are due to tourism and the secondary home market that pay the higher real estate taxes, tourism that is paying the bulk of that 1% sales tax, and are paying the accommodations tax that pay for the educational component. Obviously, we have a school board, but we also need to use our bully pulpit to emphasize the importance of education in our community and keeping those institutions in our community, and the public schools that we have providing an excellence in programs, but also encouraging all of our residents that they need to be advocates of having all of our youngsters graduate from high school and move on to a secondary, a college or other vocational training, which is so important to the success of all of our island population. And lastly, we talked about a passion of mine, recycling. And, you know, we did have a bad taste in our mouths as a town with a particular program, but we need to move forward with that and advocate for a trash and recycling program, which I know is contained in this document. It is, you know, very well put together. And Taylor, hopefully you've gotten a lot more input today to add additional tweaks before you bring a final document back to the Planning Commission, so we can examine it and move it on to the Town Council. At this time, Taylor, do we have public comments concerning this document?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and commissioners and town council members. I really appreciate the discussion today, and it's very, very helpful. So thank you. Public comments concerning our plan were to be submitted via the town's open town hall portal. It closed yesterday at noon, and all the comments were provided to you all for review and made part of the official record. Citizens are also provided the option to comment on our plan during the meeting today by phone, and we had one request from a citizen to speak. Mr. Chairman, if you would like to call on Mr. Soltis at this time to address the commission.
Certainly. Mr. Soltis, are you on the line?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can. Please proceed. Thank you for participating and being patient.
Thank you. Good morning, planning commissioners, and hopefully good morning to town council men and women if you're still on the call, and if not, that you can subsequently hear my comments. As you heard, my name is Bob Soltis. I am the board chair of the Hilton Head Island Pickleball Club. And on behalf of the club and our 200 plus members, appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning. I know at this point, after 2 hours, your attention span is probably fading, so I'll keep my comments reasonably brief. On the other hand, sometimes you remember best the last thing you've heard. The club is encouraged that your R plan document that you've been discussing all morning includes building a pickleball center on the island. And yes, Ms. Baker, I can assure you it's in the document. As some of you know, our club has worked hard and long to get to this point, and we've had lots of help. We greatly appreciate the support and interactions we've had from the Island Rec Center staff, especially Frank Zoll and Bob Rosick, Wooden Partners, who developed concept plan, Town Parks and Rec Commission and their chair, Butch Kasaya, the GIC Parks and Recreation Committee, town staff, especially Taylor Ladd, and a few of you folks meeting here today who serve on the Planning Commission and Town Council, like Todd Theodore and Glenn Stanford. We've come a long way over the last 4 years. Pickleball has become an integral part of Hilton Head Island recreational activity, as evidenced by the thousands of hours of play that take place each day on the various public and private facilities on the island. I venture to say that each of you probably knows someone who plays pickleball, and that probably a few years ago you couldn't say that. And the number of players will increase, especially when a public facility available to all is built and ready for play. This has been validated by the work Close Design, the Town Parks and Rec Commission, the GIC Parks and Rec Committee, and the town staff have done in identifying the need. From our perspective, it's no longer a question of if, the question now is when. Your work today and beyond will hopefully determine how that question will be answered. The Hilton Island Pickleball Club stands ready to continue to invest its sweat equity and financial resources in any way that we can to expand pickleball play on Hilton Head, including helping the town achieve the goal of building a public pickleball center on the island. Please let us know how we can be of service. Our website is hhipbc.com, and you will find our contact information there. Thank you again for letting us comment this morning. We look forward to the results of your workshop and your intentions moving forward. Thanks again.
Thank you, Mr. Soltis, for, number one, your patience and your very, very thoughtful comments, which I know have been heated, and we realize that pickleball is an up-and-coming sport. Teresa, we have no citizen general comments to the commission?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, well, go ahead, Teresa.
Citizens were provided the opportunity to give comments on general planning commission business. There were no requests from citizens to speak on that.
Thank you, Teresa. We are at the end of our 2-hour plus journey. I've thought we've done an excellent job managing our time and making sure the council members participated and heard the bulk of our comments. And, you know, if they're still here, we thank them for their participation. Is there any other business to come before the commission this morning? All right, hearing none, I will entertain a motion that we adjourn. Okay, Mike Scanlon moves, Leslie seconds. All in favor, raise your hand. Thank you all for your time, energy, and effort. And Taylor, thank you and your staff and your team.
You're very welcome.
Meeting is adjourned. Well done.